Welcome to Swadharma IAS Academy. You know, have you ever wondered how a country's most important document, its constitution, avoids becoming just a dusty old relic? I mean, it can't be frozen in time, right? It has to live and breathe, to grow right along with the nation it governs. The framers of the Indian Constitution, well, they understood this on a deep level, and they built that very idea of evolution right into its DNA. Let's dive in and see exactly how they did it. This quote from Jawaharlal Nehru really hits the nail on the head. He was one of the key architects, and he knew the real challenge wasn't just writing a constitution. It was designing one that could be both an anchor, solid and dependable, and a sail, flexible enough to catch the winds of change. It's all about that delicate balance between stability and being able to adapt. So, in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the philosophy behind its unique design. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the amendment playbook itself. After that, we'll explore the 3 different ways a change can be made, discover the one part of the Constitution that is totally off limits, and finally, we'll take a balanced look at the pros and cons of the whole system. Okay, let's start with that core idea. When the framers were putting India's constitution together, they looked all over the world for inspiration. And what they saw were basically 2 extremes. Some constitutions were so flexible you could change them on a whim, while others were so rigid they were practically set in stone. India, they decided, needed something different, a third path.
This slide really captures the dilemma they were facing. On one end of the spectrum, you've got Britain's model, where changing the Constitution is as easy as passing any other law. On the other end, the US, where an amendment is a monumental, almost impossible task. India purposefully said no thank you to both extremes and instead created this unique hybrid, a system designed to be neither too easy nor too difficult. They were aiming for that sweet spot.
All right, so let's get into how this actually works on the ground. The specific rulebook, the playbook, if you will, is found in Part XX of the Constitution. It's all laid out in Article 368. This article gives Parliament the power and spells out the exact procedure it has to follow to add, change, or even get rid of any provision. And the process is incredibly specific. First off, a bill to amend the Constitution can only start its journey in Parliament, not in the state legislatures. What's cool is that any member, not just a minister, can introduce it. But here's the main hurdle. It has to pass in both houses, and it has to pass separately with what's called a special majority. That's a very high bar. And if they disagree? Too bad. There's no provision for a joint session to work it out. Once it's passed by both, the president has to sign it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, here's where it gets even more clever. The framers understood that not all changes are created equal. So the Constitution itself provides 3 distinct methods for amendments, and which one you use depends entirely on how significant the change is. This table gives you a great bird's eye view of those 3 paths. The first is the simple majority, which is for more, let's say, operational adjustments. The second is the special majority, which is the standard high bar method for most big changes. And the third, the toughest of all, requires that same special majority in Parliament plus the approval of at least half the states. That one is reserved for changes that affect the very federal structure of the country. So this first path is for changes that are seen as more administrative or just part of a nation's natural evolution. Think about things like creating new states, adjusting their boundaries, or setting the rules for citizenship. Because these are necessary tweaks for a growing country, they can be done with a simple majority, just like passing a regular law. These actually fall outside the super strict process of Article 368. Now, path 2 is the standard, and it is a tough one. This is where that special majority really comes into play, and it's a 2-part test. First, you need more than 50% of the total membership of the House to vote yes. And second, of the members who are actually present and voting that day, you need a full 2/3 majority. This double lock is the high wall built to protect the most foundational parts of the Constitution, like our fundamental rights. Path 3 is the highest mountain to climb. It's reserved for anything that touches the core federal balance of power. So if Parliament wants to change how the president is elected or alter the division of powers between the central government and the states, well, it's not enough to get that special majority. They also need to get a green light from the legislatures of at least half of all the states. This gives the states a crucial say over any changes that directly affect them. Okay, so we've established that Parliament has this immense power to amend the Constitution. But this led to a massive question early in India's history. Is that power absolute? Can Parliament use it to rewrite the Constitution in any way it sees fit? This very question sparked an incredible constitutional tug-of-war. It was a battle between Parliament and the Supreme Court, a real clash of titans. On one side, Parliament's power to make laws, and on the other, the ultimate supremacy of the Constitution itself. The big question was, who has the final say? The Supreme Court's answer was the basic structure doctrine. Now, this is a landmark judicial principle. It's not actually written in the Constitution, but it's derived from its spirit. The idea is simple but so profound. Parliament can amend the Constitution, but it cannot destroy its fundamental identity. You can renovate the house, but you can't tear down the foundation. This doctrine didn't just appear out of thin air. As you can see from this timeline, it was forged in the fire of decades-long legal battles. The Supreme Court's position swung like a pendulum. At first, they sided with Parliament's power. Then they swung completely the other way to protect fundamental rights. It was a real search for balance, which was finally found in that historic 1973 Kesavananda case, which established the middle path that India still follows today. So what exactly is this basic structure? Well, the court has been pretty smart about it and has never given a complete final list. This keeps it flexible. But over time, through different landmark judgments, it has identified certain pillars, things like the supremacy of the Constitution, free and fair elections, and the separation of powers. You can think of these as the foundational, load-bearing walls of the entire constitutional building, and they simply cannot be demolished. All right, let's head into our final section and take a step back. We've seen how the whole system works and where its limits are. But how effective is it really? What are its strengths and what are its weaknesses? So, what's the final verdict? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, critics point out some real flaws. All the power to start an amendment rests with Parliament, and there's no deadline for states to give their approval. But on the other hand, a lot of experts praise it as a masterstroke of compromise, a system that has proven to be incredibly resilient, allowing the Constitution to evolve without ever losing its soul. This powerful quote from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar himself really brings it all home. He points out that the framers deliberately designed a facile, meaning easy and workable, procedure. They knew that to deny people the right to change their own constitution would be to stop the nation's growth in its tracks. When you really boil it all down, this whole thing isn't just a set of rules in a textbook. It's a living, breathing dialogue. It's this dynamic dance between Parliament, the Constitution, and the courts. It's a carefully engineered balance of power, making sure that while the will of the people can bring about change, the core principles of the nation will always endure. And that leaves us with a powerful final thought to chew on. For over 70 years, this unique system has allowed India's constitution to bend without breaking. But as the nation continues to charge into the future, the question remains, does this delicate balance between permanence and progress still hold the right key? That's a question each new generation is going to have to answer for itself.